Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. My name is Councillor Paul Prentice. I'm chair of the Planning Committee. There is no fire alarm planned for this evening, but should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please muster at Tower House car park. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. And I'd like to remind everyone present at this meeting that it's being recorded, minuted, filmed, and made available to view in live and archive form via the council's website. And if you're seated in the public gallery, it is possible that the cameras may capture your image. And if you wish to avoid being filmed, it is recommended you make a member of staff aware who can direct you where to sit. The Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. And straight on to apologies. John, do we have any apologies, please?
We do. We have apologies from councillors Keith Bothwell and Keji Moses.
Thank you. And do we have any substitutes, please?
We have Councillor Dane Buckman here for Councillor Moses.
Thank you. And John, do we have any declarations of interest received in advance?
Nothing received in advance, but the generic announcement to make is all or some councillors may have received correspondence from or spoken with applicants, agents, supporters or objectors, and some of the public speakers may also be known to members of the committee due to their work as councillors. Neither circumstance prevents councillors from participating in the meeting. However, any councillor who considers that they do not have an open mind in respect of any item on the agenda should not participate in the meeting when the relevant item is to be discussed.
Councillor Dan Smith.
Just a voluntary announcement, Chair, that I'm the item 6 is within my ward. I'm open-minded on the issue, though. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I can confirm. Oh, sorry, Councillor Thomas.
It's not a declaration, it's a comment more than a declaration, as you probably know. Basically, I've been doing planning for 10 years. Strategic sites, and traditionally, should only be one gender opponent. I think this agenda tonight is very strong. 2 months ago, we cancelled a meeting because we don't own it. So we really need to either get ourselves organised so we haven't got massive agendas. We have a late night tonight, but work tomorrow. I just think it's unfair for councillors to have so much on an agenda. And we're starting at 7 instead of 6:30. Thank you.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted. We will crack on with the agenda. There's another hand. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that I don't have an open mind on item 6 of the agenda. I'll leave the meeting when that item is discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have any other declarations? Anything else anyone wants to say now? No. Okay. Public participation then. I can confirm there are 14 public speakers tonight who will be heard immediately after the officer's presentation for each relevant item. But first, item 5 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of June 2026. And can I confirm that they are a true record by general assent, please? Thank you very much. So we move on to application number CA 25-02094. That's on Shelford Farm Estate, Broad Oak Road, Canterbury, Kent. So that's on pages 12 to 32 of the packs. And I'm going to ask Charlotte Manell to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Apologies. Just one moment, I'm just having some IT issues. Thank you for your patience. The proposal seeks full planning permission for the erection of a data centre building and compound within the Shelford landfill site. The proposed...
Screen.
Oh, sorry. Right. Is it working? Nope. What is going
We're just sorting out the screens. We'll be with you in a second.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so the proposal seeks full planning permission for the erection of a data centre building and compound within the Shelford landfill site. The proposed data centre would be a small-scale AI data centre accessed from Broad Oak Road to the south via a private driveway. This application is brought to the Planning Committee for determination at the request of Councillor Mackenzie and Councillor Ricketts, so members can consider the impact of the proposed development on water demand and pollution, energy use and security, and increased traffic. Whilst there are no particular policies related to data centres in Canterbury's adopted local plan, data centres have been classified by the government as part of the UK's critical national infrastructure, and the NPPF requires planning policies to identify suitable sites for data centres and for planning decisions to address their specific locational requirements. These include access to high-speed, high-capacity fibre networks and the requirement for a secure site which is not within an area of flood risk. The proposed site benefits from these features and it is considered to be a suitable location for a data centre. The site comprises an existing area of hard standing with a large storage tank and shipping containers from the previous use of the site as a composting facility. The data centre building would be sited where the existing storage tank is currently located, and that can be seen in the centre of the site here. The site is adjacent to the Valencia Energy Centre, which generates electricity from landfill gas. The proposal includes a private wire connection to the energy centre to provide a reliable and efficient source of energy for the data centre. PV panels would also be installed on the roof of the data centre to generate energy for the data centre itself. It is anticipated that the data centre will be run on renewable energy from these sources for a minimum of 75% of the time. Any residual energy required would be supplied by the national grid. The data centre is expected to consume around 140 megawatt hours of electricity over a 24-hour period when fully utilised, which is within the power generated by the energy centre. The landfill site itself is due to close in 2036. However, KCC, as the Waste Planning Authority, has confirmed that the landfill site will continue to generate landfill gas for many years and even decades after the closure. In terms of water usage, South East Water have confirmed that they have no concerns with supplying the data centre with up to 20 cubic metres or 20,000 litres of water per day, and this would be secured by condition. This maximum cap equates to the water usage of approximately 60 households. A closed-loop liquid cooling system is proposed to be installed to keep the data centre servers cool and to prevent overheating. These systems work by continually recycling the water round, like a central heating or air conditioning system, and the system would only need to be emptied and refilled if there are maintenance issues. Once this system is operational, for the majority of the year, the only water usage would be for the welfare facilities for on-site staff, which would be minimal. On days where the external ambient air temperature is 25 degrees Celsius or higher, adiabatic cooling will be required in addition to the closed-loop cooling system. This method of cooling works by evaporating water rather than using a traditional refrigeration cycle, and it therefore uses an increased amount of water. However, the applicant has confirmed that the water used by the adiabatic cooling would be well within the 20 cubic metres daily cap and would likely be no more than half of this amount. In terms of pollution of controlled waters, KCC as the local lead flood authority and the Environment Agency have both confirmed that they have no objection to the proposal, subject to conditions regarding the submission and approval of a verification report for the surface water drainage system and further investigation and a remediation strategy in the event of finding previously unidentified contamination during the development. The site is located immediately adjacent to an existing HGV parking and holding area for the landfill site, which is required to minimise congestion on the highways leading to the landfill site. This would be retained as part of the proposal. Post-construction, the data centre would have a full-time staffing level of 4, with security staff on site 24/7 and occasional visits from maintenance staff. There would therefore be a low volume of traffic associated with the data centre, and KCC Highways have no concerns with the ability for the local highway network to cope with this. Here are the elevations of the data centre. The building would have a light industrial appearance, and it would be comparable to the existing surrounding buildings on the landfill site. This is a bird's eye view of the site. The data centre building and the compound would be situated here in the centre, and they would be mostly screened from views from Broad Oak Road and the railway line to the south by the existing mature tree belts surrounding the site. Any glimpse views of the building would be viewed in the context of the existing similarly designed buildings and the landfill site as a whole. The site would be similarly screened in views from the public right-of-way along the ancient woodland and the Westbleen and Thorndon Woods site of special scientific interest to the south and northeast of the site, and it would have an acceptable impact on the landscape character of the Canterbury area of high landscape value and the Stour Valley Slope landscape character area, which it's situated in. The next few slides show the visibility of the site from the railway line and Broad Oak Road. As can be seen in these photos, there are mature trees lining the railway line, which ensure that longer views of the landfill site from passengers on the railway are screened. The view to the site opens up slightly at the level crossing across Broad Oak Road, but this only allows glimpse views of the existing landfill site from the railway passengers, when travelling to the west. There is the potential for public views of the data centre from Broad Oak Road at the junction with Shallock Road, but as you can see from these photos, the site is screened by the tree belt immediately to the south, and it will be viewed in the context of the landfill site to the rear and the existing industrial buildings to the front, which is considered to be acceptable. Overall, the proposal is considered to be appropriately located, and it would have an acceptable impact on energy and water usage and would not harm the character and appearance of the area or impact on the highway network. It is therefore recommended that conditional planning permission is granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are 5 speakers for this item, so I'm going to take them in turn. And as a reminder, each of our speakers has 3 minutes, and after 3 minutes, I will ask you to wind up. We start with Councillor Peter Campbell, who is an objector. So if you'd like to come to the speaker's desk, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. My name is Peter Campbell and I'm a Ward Councillor on Canterbury City Council, but I'm also a committee member for the Surrey and Broadoak Residents Association. The proposed Shelford data centre sits very close to Broadoak Village. I want to begin by recognising the wider national context. The UK currently has just over 200 data centre planning applications currently in the system awaiting review and approval, with rapid growth continuing through this year, so that number is likely to increase. AI-capable data centres are becoming increasingly important to the digital economy, and it's reasonable to acknowledge that more capacity will be needed nationally. Many of the largest schemes are now entering the Nationally Significant Infrastructure Projects (NSIP) regime, where decisions are taken directly by the Secretary of State. These are multi-billion-pound hyperscale campuses with major grid reinforcement and full environmental impact assessments. But the proposal before us today is not one of those schemes. It is a small single-building data centre using an untried energy model based on landfill gas and rooftop solar. And precisely because it is small, experimental, and the first of its kind in the Canterbury district, robust scrutiny is essential. My objection is based on several planning grounds, each linked to the National Planning Policy Framework, the NPPF, and Canterbury City Council policies as enshrined in the local plan. First one, insufficient information to make a sound planning judgment. The NPPF requires decision makers to have sufficient information to determine the application and to ensure development is appropriate for its location. Locally, we have policies that require clear evidence on amenity impacts. The application lacks essential detail on cooling, water use, noise, heat reuse, IT load and energy resilience. On water specifically, although South East Water has not submitted an objection and the stated maximum of cubic metres per day is not excessive by any measure, let alone data centre standards, this means that refusal on water grounds alone would be difficult to argue. However, the cooling strategy itself is not described, and the applicant proposes to relegate this to a planning condition, number 11. Given the considerable risk of a future shift to a more water-intensive cooling regime, members cannot make an informed judgment without this additional detail that we're seeking. Under the NPPF and local plan policies, these matters must be provided up front and not left to conditions. A deferral is therefore justified until this detail is produced, and a revised condition 11 must at least require a dedicated water meter, retention and reporting of consumption records, and further planning approval before any more water-intensive cooling system is introduced. Second item, unproven energy model and lack of unsecured renewable supply. The NPPF requires energy.
Thank you. Could you start to wind up?
Yes. The NPPF requires energy strategy to be deliverable, reliable, and resilient. Local plan policies require credible low-carbon energy evidence.
Thank you.
The claimed private wire connection to the energy centre is presented as fundamental to the
Thank you very much.
sustainability of the
Your
scheme.
time is up.
Okay, thank you.
Next speaker is Tim Long, who's an objector.
Hello, thank you. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to speak today. I'm a resident in Canterbury and concerned about the application. I'm here to urge the committee to reject Carbon 3 AI's application for the AI data centre at the Shelford landfill site. Looking past the green AI buzzwords in their planning statement reveals critical contradictions that violate Canterbury's local planning rules. First, the water grab. The developers claim this facility is an eco-friendly closed-loop system. But on page 14, they admit that when summer temperatures rise, they must switch to adiabatic cooling, spraying clean mains water onto industrial pads so it evaporates. High power AI servers running heavy workloads can burn through tens of thousands of litres of water daily during heat waves, yet the applicants fail to provide exact technical data of their local water draw. Copious water consumption in an already water-stressed district directly violates policy CC13, which protects our local water resources. So phase 1 for the plan is a 20 meter cube water draw, and that's for a 4 megawatt data center. However, if phase 2 went up, say, to 10 megawatts, that would be 100 meter cube of water, equivalent to 300 domestic properties per day. Second, the hidden noise risk. The developers plan to build the compound in 2 phases. Phase 1 builds the shell. Phase 2 moves giant industrial pumps, chillers, and external cooling fans into the yard. Shockingly, they admit the exact noise specifications for this heavy equipment are yet to be determined. They are asking this council to pass the project now and fix noise limits later, as they are with the water consumption. High density AI cooling creates a constant low frequency hum, and noise pollution is a proven health risk. Granting permission before proving this equipment won't bleed noise into the neighbouring Westbleen Nature Reserve also ignores policy DBE3 and policy LB4. Third, the energy myth. The core justification for building on this site is plugging directly into the landfill's methane gas engines, but landfill gas is a finite shrinking resource. Active dumping at Shelford is drawing to a close, and methane yields will drop. This facility will inevitably become a permanent drain on Canterbury's constrained public energy grid via its backup connection. Please uphold our local planning policies, protect our environment, and vote no on this application today. Thank you.
Folks, if I could ask you not to clap. The reason being is that we have to try to ensure that the debate is kept within the committee. I know clapping is very tempting, and I appreciate people have views, but I'm going to sort of discourage that, please. Next speaker is Margaret Hall, who's an objector. Thank you.
I'm speaking for Shelford Landfill Action Group, and we urge you to refuse this application as this proposal will add to power and water infrastructure issues in Canterbury. The applicants have no track record of running such centres and have close links to the non-compliant waste company Valencia Waste Management. Although they market this application as a green circular economy project, our evaluation views it entirely unsustainable violation of the Canterbury District Local Plan. Firstly, the applicants claim that using a closed-loop water system means less water is highly misleading. As we've heard, the internal piping is sealed and the external adiabatic assistance cooling mechanism acts as an open-loop evaporative system, and on hot summer's days, the secondary system will draw thousands of litres of fresh water from our public supply. This will spike commercial water consumption at the exact seasonal moments when Canterbury District experiences severe droughts and residential supply outages, directly threatening our community's water supply. The UK water trade body told MPs that the government's failure to address cooling demands means AI growth plans are fatally flawed, and the government's water forecast explicitly excludes data centres. Secondly, power use. The developer plans to fuel the landfill using methane gas, a non-zero carbon solution. Landfill gas generation from the site will decline and the site's closing in 5 years. However, they have already talked about using the national grid as backup from the outset. However, how often is an open door in this case? This will result in them pulling heavy baseline power from an already strained grid. We know that recent power outages stop water pumps working in the area. Thirdly, noise and heat. A constant 24/7 low-frequency hum from industrial cooling fans and any backup generators will permanently degrade the quality of the area and disrupt sensitive rural wildlife habitats. Heat generated, A Cambridge University study has highlighted such sites raise the land and air temperature between 2 and 9 degrees. This also affects wildlife and can be a potential fire hazard. I note that the photos that we saw are out of date as well. This development severely breaches the Council's Sustainable Assessment Objective 14, which considers how commercial land allocations impact the physical and mental well-being of residents, as well as the long-term viability of the local community. The global UK and tech industry are not settled on best practice for such sites, and the Local Government Association have stated a central concern for local government is the lack of transparency and consistency provided by AI providers. Current corporate level reporting does not provide councils with site-specific verifiable information needed to assess energy use, water consumption, emissions or cumulative impacts at a local level. This undermines effective planning and exposes the councils to reputational risks. Do not allow Canterbury to become a test bed for high impact, low employment digital infrastructure. Please provide our local grid, our water supply and our residents protect our residents by refusing this application. UK planning precedents give a clear duty to reject infrastructure on these grounds. I've got more to say, but I won't.
Thank you very much. Can I invite Councillor Beth Forrester, who is a ward councillor?
Hello, I'm the councillor for St Stephen's Ward, which neighbours the site. If approved, this will be the first data centre in the Canterbury district. This is an application on an already industrial site using waste methane to power the data centre. All green and good, the developer will say. But for a new technology for which the long-term impacts are unclear, this is not the detailed application it could or should have been. This application asks for permission based on the best case scenario, not answering what will happen if those plans fail. I've met with the developer and tried to get answers to these questions. They have not been forthcoming. Speakers have talked about water consumption of data centres, and the developer will tell you that this is low. The estimates in the report presented to you are based on daytime average temperatures being no more than 25 degrees. But if adiabatic cooling is needed for a sustained period, what happens? How much data usage, how much water usage is required? How long for, and what will be the impact on the rest of the district? The developer will tell you that they expect the centre to be powered by underground methane 75% of the time. Marvellous, you may say, but what happens on an atypical day? What happens when that system fails or stops? I was simply told this will not happen. I was not told, even when pressed, what this would mean for the draw on the local grid if there was failure, and in turn, the impact on other businesses and local residents. The report states that noise will be within acceptable levels, but it's also accepted there will be ongoing and consistent hum from the site, and that this will increase for emergency procedures, which will be temporary and infrequent. Those terms are vague. There will be a condition for noise and development, but we know as councillors, in reality, this means it will be for my residents and the local authority to monitor and ensure compliance. The site plans in your pack, and indeed the plans of the application, lack detail. The photos seen tonight are out of date. The elevation does not provide context for the landscape in which it sits, and due to the high security of the site under its current use, committee members have no opportunity to look at the site themselves and must accept the word of the developer. Such lack of transparency on all fronts is unclear in its reasoning, and rightly makes my residents nervous. It makes them nervous because this is the same site which only a few years ago built a MRF without planning permission, the same site which only fixed its security fences of a dangerous workplace after years of complaints when there's a community meeting and national press coverage. Because this is development which looks again at how much you can take from and profit from our community without identifying anything the community will get back. So I submit to you, you don't have sufficient information to make a sound decision tonight. There are too many gaps and questions. I ask you to defer your decision to raise these questions and use that time purposefully for a site visit. The benefit of such a site visit is clear and substantial. The full impact of the development is not evident from the plans provided. There are significant objections that will be best evidenced
Start
at
to
the
wind up,
site.
please.
And the application is so contentious and important that it deserves your fullest consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I invite Councillor Alex Ricketts to speak next, who's the ward councillor?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for hearing me out. And also thank you to the people who spoke before me for saving some of your time and mine by saying some of the things I was going to say. I too feel that we don't have enough information from the developers of the site, as is probably borne out by the fact that we had a briefing from ERA4 last night and they submitted some more information on the basis of questions asked on that just this morning. But there are two areas in particular that concern me. One is the lack of a defined end date for operation. Now, we're told that there will be plenty of methane produced by the landfill in order to provide power to the site for some significant period, perhaps years or even decades. I think it would be a good idea to actually put some level of timescale on how long this will operate for. And that's for two very good reasons. One is, what will the draw on the national grid be should those methane supplies dry up while the site is still operational? And the other one is water use. We're told, in fact, there have been a variety of different comparisons made, but the condition of 20 cubic meters of water per day for the adiabatic cooling system, that's not something South East Water has said that's absolutely fine. Anything over 20 cubic meters of water a day requires an extraction license. So that's what that number means. It just means that they won't have to apply for an extraction license. So that equates to about 20,000 litres of water. The average person uses about 142 litres of water per day, a figure that actually needs to be reduced. So that's about 140 people a day when the adiabatic cooling system is in operation. That's when it's over 25 degrees centigrade. Last year, there were 35 days over 25 degrees centigrade. That is a number that's only going to continue to rise. Again, another reason to understand how long this site is going to be operating for. Because if this is still there in 30 years' time, that 25 days is going to be significantly higher. The information that was provided today by ERA4 has actually finally given us a little bit more information, something that I suspect should have been provided to this committee a long time ago. They're saying that they're planning for 40 days of operation over 25 degrees C, which I think is wise, and that the water use per year would be 2,000 to 3,000 cubic meters, 5.5 to 8.2 cubic meters a day. To put that in context very quickly, an Olympic swimming pool is 2,500 cubic meters. So they're looking at somewhere between 1.5 Olympic swimming pools of water a year operating that, that cooling system. The Broad Oak Reservoir, when it comes on, will be something like 5 million cubic meters, to give us a scale at the other day. What I would suggest is I suggest you defer to have a look at this in more detail, and I would also suggest that you put a time limit and an upper limit on that water condition, something in the region of maybe 9.5 cubic meters a day and an annual limit of 3,500 cubic meters or lower.
Ricketts, if you start to wind up. Thank you very much. So I'm going to recommend the officer's recommendation from the chair. The reason I do that is I'm doing this so that the officer report can be debated, but I need to make really, really clear I do have an open mind on the application, and I'll reach my opinion on the acceptability or otherwise of the planning application once the debate has concluded. Do I see a seconder, please?
Chair, just to be clear, do I speak now or after you've made the proposal?
If you want to say something, you're very well to say it now.
Okay.
After the proposal, sorry, after the proposal. So do I see a seconder, please? Councillor Woods.
Yes, Chair. With the same proviso that you've just given, I'll second the proposal so that we can debate the report. Thank you.
We can debate it. Thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor Mackenzie, you're welcome to come in now.
Okay, thank you, Chair. You'd all be very pleased to know that actually most of my points were covered by the public speakers, and I'm not going to waste another 5 minutes of your time just saying the same things in slightly different wording. But like, what I would add is that if I find it, the officer's report acknowledged that the proposal will reduce the existing HGV turning and holding area. So while I recognise that KCC has withdrawn the objection on the basis that it will be a relatively small section lost, you know, I don't believe this fully appreciates the reality experienced by a lot of local residents based on the congestion caused by HGVs associated with the landfill site, which is already a persistent issue on the surrounding road network. I, along with several ward councillors, get regular complaints about HGVs blocking or delaying traffic on Shallock Road, Broad Oak Road and Vauxhall Road. And it's raised consistently at the community liaison group meetings with the Shelford landfill site. So given the existing pressures, I'm concerned that even a modest reduction could affect the congestion on the roads. So that is another reason that I would add on for a site visit, so that we can actually see where the HGVs and other vehicles will come in and how they'll be able to turn and be held on site if this was to go ahead. Yeah, as I say, I fully endorse particularly Councillor Ricketts and Councillor Forrester's speeches. I agree with pretty much everything they've said. And I would also like a deferral and a site visit so we can obtain further information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Okay, so I'll open it up for general discussion among the committee. Councillor Dixie and then Councillor Stockley. Thank you.
I'm struggling to understand the electricity use. 140 megawatt hours in 24 hours means a power rating of about 6 megawatts to be generated by these gas engines. How many gas engines are there? Because typically these gas engines will be between 0.5 megawatt and 1 megawatt. So I would guess there needs to be up to 12 of these gas engines. How many are there? I suspect rather less.
Thank you. I don't have specific information in terms of how many engines there are at the energy site, but we have been assured by the applicant that the proposed energy usage is all within that energy that is generated by the energy site itself.
To be honest, I don't believe it.
Councillor Stockley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose a site visit because I too am somewhat concerned about the way this has been laid out. The power usage is huge, and the adiabatic cooling system sounds to be extremely wasteful of our natural resources. So I would value a site visit. If anyone would like to second that, please.
Councillor Dan Smith seconded it. Yep. Yep. Okay. Councillor Butman.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions that I'd like. I mean, that could also obviously find out the answers for before a site visit if we agree to that, or after it.
Councillor Butman, just to interrupt you ever so briefly, are you speaking about the proposal for a site visit or more generally?
No, I'm not speaking about the site visit. Do you want to? I agree that a site visit could be useful, but obviously there's questions as well that could be useful to be answered as well.
Yep. So I think because the proposal for a site visit's been proposed and seconded, I'm just going to hear. I'm very happy to hear your comments, obviously, but it's going to take comments on the site visit just for now. If that's okay, I will come back to you. Councillor Edwards, is this on a site visit?
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, it seems to me if we're having a deferral, during which we may have a site visit, if that's what people agree, some of the other points that have been raised could be looked into at the same time as in the deferral. So it could be for more than one reason. I mean, do obviously check legally whether we can discuss those now, but it would be, we don't really want to close this down before we've kind of put all our questions, is really my concern. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry for the pause there. So I'll carry on taking points about the site visit, at which we've had a proposer and a seconder on, just so we're discussing that point, because obviously there are things you may wish to bring up you may wish to talk about specifically on a site visit. I'm just going to take Councillor Thomas and I'll come to you, Councillor Dixie.
Yeah, I was just going to say, could you explain the speaker's right if they spoken tonight, speak at the planning at the site visit, and obviously if they could speak again when it comes back?
Simon Thomas is going to answer that point.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there are two opportunities to speak. So if speakers have spoken tonight, they can either speak on the site visit or speak when the items return to the following committee meeting.
Councillor Dixie, then Councillor Stock.
Thank you, Chair. Wouldn't it be more logical to have a deferment, because a site visit, there's nothing to see? So I know there are a lot of questions being raised which we need answers to. We won't get those answers on a site visit. We need to have those answers in this chamber. So that's meant to be constructive, not critical.
That's a constructive point on a proposal for a site visit. I understand. Councillor Stockley.
It's not my intention, Chair, to shut down debate. If it would help, I will happily withdraw my proposal for a site visit to allow debate to continue at this point on the broader issues. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards.
I was anticipating you might accept that and coming back in.
So I take it the proposal for a site visit is withdrawn then if there's no proposer, and there seems to be agreement. I know Councillor Dan Smith, you were seconding
I'm
it.
happy to go along with Councillor Stockton.
Happy to unsecond the site visit. Okay, that's fine.
For the moment, whilst the debate continues.
I have to say I do agree with that myself. I think if we can cover as much ground as possible in the debate tonight, I think there's an awful lot we probably haven't covered yet. We've got the right people here to answer the questions, so as far as we can. So shall we just continue with the debate then in that case? So Councillor Edwards, then actually now Councillor Buttman, because you did come in earlier, then I sort of stopped you in your tracks. So Councillor Buttman, then I'll take Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a few things, if I may, ask a few questions. So it's partly about the solar panels. Most solar panels would have like battery storage, but there doesn't seem to be too much. It says potential for battery storage, but is there any safety risks for that and associated, like fire risks due to this battery storage? Because a lot of these things in the report are like ifs and maybes. There's no sort of definite information, which is why I think obviously that's why we're asking all these questions, because we haven't got the definite answers or the definite information to start with. So yeah, so one would be on the battery storage and what the plans would be for that. I think Councillor Ricketts said about the over 25 degrees. I think there's been 20 days in May, June and July so far this year that have been over that temperature. And then, obviously South East Water say, I'm just reading from the list, South East Water say no issues, but what are the contingency plans? Because there doesn't seem to be anything that, if maintenance issues arise and the area has to be dropped and emptied and filled back up again, where does the water go, and where does the water come from, and is there going to be capacity to fill it up again, especially if there's hot weather? I mean, the hot weather, the data center, there'll be a lot more use on online. It's not just AI, is it? It's online, like online banking. It's not just artificial intelligence. Yeah, and then I think Councillor Mackenzie mentioned about the lorries. That you go through there every morning, and there's so many lorries queuing. Not even in the morning, during the day. So what happens with them? And then I'll ask one more question to let other people in. We'll talk about water outages. What happens when there's power outages as well? I mean, where's the backup? I know it says about going onto the grid, but if there's a power outage, I mean, what sort of generators will they be installing, and how noisy will that be? Are they going to be like the diesel generators? Will I say? No, I'll leave it there for the moment. I'll just let other people come in. Thank you.
Simon Thomas is going to come in on those points.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think we need to be a little bit careful about how much scrutiny we give the the question of electricity use and water use. If this application didn't include that detail, we'd still be recommending approval of the application. And the reason for that is it's not our responsibility as a planning committee to decide how much water and electricity should be used. The only time it would ever be a question for us is if, for example, the water company or the electricity board said they couldn't supply this use at all. Then it would be an issue for us, but it's not. That's not where we are with this application. I mean, what we've done is we've given you quite a lot of detail about that, really to highlight the relative sustainability of this particular data center compared to others that don't use gases from the landfill site and so on. So I think just a word of caution there, we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole as such, because these are not planning matters. The amount of water and electricity is not a planning matter for us today.
Thank you. Did you want to come back on that, Councillor Butler?
Sorry, it wasn't, the detail on that. It was more of a case of, we talk about planning, what are the contingency plans for all of this if things go wrong? What is a contingency plan for the electric? What is a contingency plan for the water if things mess up? Thank you.
Simon.
Well, again, it's not a matter for us. It's like any business, it might make contingency plans if it's sensible, but it's not for us to oversee that. That's not a planning matter.
I think we have to sort of keep it within what is within the remit of planning law and what we can consider as a committee. Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. I've a few questions, and Simon Thomas has explained some of them. I mean, I've written the word fire in here because if there is no water supply cuts off, there's obviously a possibility of a fire, which is down to the operators, because we're not allowed to refuse it on the case of if it catches fire, we told you so that's fine. I'm only left, I've got 4 things written down, but I can only really use the one question, and that's when it comes to the backup generators, is there decibels on sounds? Because I remember when I thought the bus depot behind me, they had to put acoustic fencing up because the noise levels were higher than what they initially said, and I don't know if there's surveys being done on that. Thank you.
Charlotte. Yep.
Thank you. Yes, the applicant did submit a noise impact assessment with this application. That's been reviewed by the noise consultants, which our environmental health team use. They are happy with the findings of it. And condition 10 relates to this noise. So that relates to the noise in a non-emergency situation and also in an emergency situation, such as where backup generators would need to be used. In normal operation situation, the background noise, it would be 5 decibels below the background noise. The site, existing noise there's quite a there's already quite a background noise from the railway and the road noise. But then in an emergency situation, it would be 5 decibels above that background noise. The environmental health team's noise consultants think that this is acceptable because it would be infrequent. They have specifically said that it would be noticeable, but not extreme. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just like to question, in one sense, the fact that we can't ask for more details on some of the points that Simon made, because we have a condition 11 about the cooling strategy, and it talks about demonstrating that the water consumption won't exceed 20 cubic metres. And anticipated normal operational water usage, and so on. So if we've got a condition, we are requiring something within the planning application that we're discussing today. And some of the points that were made by people at the beginning, the speakers, was that perhaps it would be good to add some detail about perhaps, you know, how many days a year it would be advisable to run this plant using extra water, and some suggestion was something about 40 days over 25 is what they're anticipating. So could we limit it to that? And the other was the fact that people have said, I've asked quite a lot of questions about the energy supply, and there is very clear claims in here that there will be an energy supply that will meet 75% of the need. Well, if we've got a report that's asking us to judge something based on that, I think we need more than the applicants say so. And that's the kind of evidence I think that people were suggesting we might like to ask for. I don't know whether we can get that, but certainly we've made the point, we've made the claim, as it were. He's made the claim, or they've made the claim. Probably it's a they. But is there any way that we can actually check that? And then finally, I probably think that the point that's being made about the methane lasting for years, maybe decades after, is probably correct. I mean, I actually have no reason to think it isn't. I mean, we know we've still got methane coming off the Stowe Road Community Park. There's pipes there that are checked on a regular basis. So we know that landfill sites produce methane for very, very many years. So I've no reason to doubt it. But again, we could check that if we're going for a deferment. Those are the 3 points I'd like to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlotte, did you want to come back? Or Simon wants to come back on that point? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, I mean, I think the applicant put information in about where the gas source was going to come from to sort of highlight what they might consider to be a sustainable development in relative terms. So I think they put it in as a positive for the application. Had they not put it in, it wouldn't have made any difference. It's not our business to be considering electricity use. And the other point you made, I was going to answer that one as well. Oh yeah, in terms of the condition, there probably isn't a justification in planning terms, to be frank, to put that condition on controlling water use for the reasons I mentioned earlier. I think the applicant has said they're happy with it going on because they think they can achieve it. So, yeah, I mean, they could have told us that they didn't want that condition and we would have accepted that. But they've gone with that condition, so it's probably a positive in that sense.
Thank you. Councillor Dan Smith.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think a couple of points, really. First, a couple of, I think if it were to go ahead, recommendations or at least ideas for them to think about. Councillor Campbell, in his speech, mentioned a dedicated water meter, and I think that's actually a very sound idea for monitoring how much water is used. Obviously, there's a number of days when it might be needed. Also, in the closed water system, using soft water is something that I'd recommend because it would increase the lifespan of it and lower the maintenance in a hard water area. But also, I think in terms of the actual consultations with various bodies, I know Hackington Parish Council, which this falls in their area, don't seem to have had much information provided to them and don't seem to have been consulted. Although they don't list it on the consultees. So I'm a little surprised by that, shall I say, and I would suggest that the company does engage with the local parish council. And certainly they have posed questions and don't seem to have got answers. So I would recommend that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stockley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the council officers for bringing Atabatic to our attention. I've never heard of it before. I had to Google it. Interesting. As Simon Thomas has said, it's not up to us to redesign their cooling system, but it does seem exceedingly wasteful. The other thing that concerns me is, while I accept that a lot of the water will be evaporated off by the excessive amount of heat generated by 1.4 no, 1400 megawatts of power per day, there will be a lot of excess water. Also, when the system needs draining down, we don't know how much water is held within the system, the cooling system in total. Where will that go, and what effect will that have on the drainage system? You know, we are talking about fairly major. The other concern I have is, again, probably not a planning matter. What happens when the water does go off? And as we know in Herne Bay, it does go off. You know, what happens if it's a hot day and the water goes off? You know, do they shut it down? Is that a possibility? We've heard from Dane about the possibility of battery fires. To be honest, in my view, how it's powered is largely irrelevant. And this is a nod to the green agenda. The fact it's got solar panels on the roof, it might as well have a turbine. You know, it's going to make no difference. The amount of power they're using will be colossal. Solar panels will make virtually no difference whatsoever. Speaking of someone who has solar panels. So yeah, I'm still of the opinion that we need a site visit. I do accept that there is possibly nothing to see there, but has been mentioned by the speakers, we are not allowed, because it's private property, to wander around there, and it's a dangerous environment anyway with lorries turning, etc. So I still think that is a justifiable reason to have a site visit. Thank you. And I propose such.
Okay, so we've re-proposed the site visit, which is absolutely fine. If we have a seconder, that's
Still happy to second that.
and you're re-seconding, and that's absolutely fine too. Do we need to? I mean, we've already debated it once, so it would seem odd to go back and re-debate it. But
Sorry, Charles, I was trying to get Kath's attention. Yeah, sorry, it slipped my mind, but the Constitution has been amended, so speakers are allowed on the site visit and when the application comes back. So apologies for that, Chair.
yeah, and I've got a note to that effect, which I was going to mention, so we can clarify that. Do we need to discuss the merits of a site visit again if we've already discussed it once? I feel like we've sort of.
I'm happy to go straight to a vote on that.
I meant to say there's not much point in re-debating it. Councillor Thomas, did you want to make a point?
I didn't make a comment. I know the site anyway. I used to put my green waste in there, so when I was commercial.
I propose we go straight to the vote then on the proposal for a site visit. So John's going to set that up for us now, and we'll see where we get.
That has carried 5 in favour, 1 against and 1 abstain.
So, are there any points, Charlotte, you'd like to come back on after the debate there?
Thank you. In terms of the water system, if it needed to be drained down, the applicant has informed me that this would be drained into a tanker and then refilled. The system would also be filled in stages as well, so it wouldn't all come from the mains water at one period of time.
I was just going to ask if there's any other. We'll give Charlotte the opportunity to come back on any of the points, but if there are any other matters the committee wants further information on that it feels that we don't yet have further information on, then now is a good time to raise it. Councillor Thomas.
Sorry, Chair. I'm trying to work out if they empty it all out into a tanker, so it's the same water. And they put it all back in again. What's the point of taking it out? I just don't understand. Sorry.
Charlotte?
So this would just be if maintenance is required.
Are there any other points? I think everyone on the committee's had sort of opportunity to raise all the points they want to for now, because obviously we voted for a site visit. I don't think there's anything else that Charlotte needs to come back on right away. Bear with me just a second. So I will wrap that item up then, in that case, as we do have a site visit coming up, and obviously members of the committee will be notified about that in the usual way. We'll move on in that case to the next item, but I'm just going to give 2 minutes to pause the meeting so that we can have a bit of a shuffle round at the front here. Thank you. Okay, everyone, we're going to resume the meeting. This is item number 7 on the agenda. Application CA/24/00224/OUT, land at Bodkin Farm, Thanet Way, and that's on pages 33 to 51 of your papers. And I'm going to ask Simon Thomas, who's our head of planning, to introduce the report. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Thank you for this. This is an application that was reported to committee several months ago and was deferred by the committee to answer a number of specific questions which are set out in the report. I'll briefly just run through the presentation to remind you of the site and the proposal. So it's land at Bodkin Farm, which is at Chesfield. You can see from this plan, you've got the railway station in the top left, and then the site is edge red with May Downs Road, the nearest residential street to the site. You've got actually a solar farm to the right hand side to the east. So this is the proposal. It's essentially a school and residential primarily. The school would be a secondary school, and the residential a mix of market housing and some affordable housing as well. In terms of building heights, I suppose the key point here is that the applicant has confirmed that along the back rear boundary with May Downs Road, they would be happy with the condition saying that they should be bungalows only, so single-story dwellings only. So they're happy with that. I'll give you a little. This is the video I did last time. I'll just try and speed it on actually. So this is entering the site top of May Downs Road. I don't know if you can see that. And there's a public footpath. And what this will show, this will open up and show you the site. So as you look directly ahead now, that's where the school would go, along that boundary. And then I've just sort of turned around and given you a view of the site, of most of the site actually, not all of the site, but just to give you sort of an idea of the character of the site. Get rid of this. Right, so again, just as a reminder, this is an illustrative layout. So the proposal is for a school here with obviously the associated sports pitches, and then the residential will be on this part of the site. As we said in the previous report, it is currently designated as a green gap within our local plan, our current local plan. And we did refuse an application on there about 10 years ago, which was upheld at appeal. But since then, the primary difference is the fact that we're in presumption, which I believe we were at the time 10 years ago. But this site has also been identified within the draft local plan, which has now been published under regulation 19 and consulted upon, and will the next step would be it will be submitted by the council as the council's proposed plan to the planning inspectorate, who will then examine that plan. So the weight given to this site and the significance of this site within our plan, our emerging plan, tips the balance in terms of the difference between the previous position and the current one. A couple of other bits just to show you the other sort of positive from this site is the fact that it is quite close to, or very close to, a railway station and also bus routes. So you can see them located here. And these are the crossing points. So the proposal will include pedestrian crossing points at 3 points along the Old Thanet Way. I won't show you that one. And then the other thing that's happened since the committee last considered the application is that you'll remember that Kent County Council were concerned about reducing the speed limit on the Thanet Way from I think it's from national speed limit to 40 miles per hour, and this is something that the committee was very keen to progress. We had a meeting with the county council, and effectively what they were saying is that when you've got a road that looks like it shouldn't be a 40-mile-an-hour road, then it's very difficult to control the speed of drivers, and the police will object to a proposal to reduce the speed limit down to one that's in people's minds might be an unnatural speed limit. It might not be. It wouldn't be the limit that you'd expect from a road of that type. But what we did is we discussed with Kent County Council what would make the difference. You know, how could you get it down to 40 as a natural limit? And what they asked for is some data from the applicant about the number of pedestrian movements that there would be alongside the road, because psychologically with drivers, if they're seeing people walking up and down and seeing a more of a residential area, they will be more inclined to slow down. And KCC was happy that the amount of activity within the area would be sufficient to for them to accept a 40-mile-an-hour limit along that stretch. So that was a positive outcome from that meeting. I'm going to take this out now, John. I think just to recap, this report is, so there was a report to the committee last time round, and that set out all of the material considerations. It recommended approval, but the committee deferred the application for to answer 5 questions for information on 5 points. And the first one, and the report which you will have read, covers all of these points, but it was about how the green gap policies in 2017 local plan have been assessed in the tilted balance. So the report explains that. What I said earlier on, particularly the local plan, draft local plan allocation, that's a significant factor, and of course the evidence behind that, which led to that conclusion. And of course now we've got a secondary school proposed for the site that Kent County Council has said it will be raising funds through other developments within the area to deliver that school at the appropriate time. And the developer will allow that school will be available to transfer for the next 20 years. So KCC will take on that school sometime in the next 20 years. They don't want it sooner than that because they've got to maintain it. So obviously it's in their interest not to have the land before it's needed. We also were asked to gain some further clarity around the Southern Water wastewater disposal arrangements. And actually through that discussion with Southern Water, they said that actually, despite what they'd said previously, there were upgrades required to the wastewater system. We asked them how long it would take for those upgrades to be delivered. They said about 2 years. So what we're recommending now is that we put a condition on, which was talked about at the last meeting, that says that the development can't be occupied until that wastewater wastewater infrastructure has been upgraded. So to put a stop on that development until that's happened. I've talked about the 50-mile-an-hour speed limit. The other point was, well, the other 2 points were that members were concerned that the play areas should be located more centrally and more and better surveyed. So in places that where they can be overlooked from residential property for the safety of the children using them. And the applicant, the condition, as we've tweaked the proposed condition to say that they should be all of those or both of those things when the reserve matters application is put in, because it's an outline application, so we haven't got that detail, but we're saying when it does come in, then it needs to be centrally located and overlooked. And then the final point was around the bus route, because I think councillors were concerned that although there's no proposed bus route through the site at the moment, members wanted to see it sort of future-proof, so that the roads were sufficiently wide to allow a bus to enter the site. And the applicant has confirmed that it will be, and not least because the roads serving the school will have buses using them. So it will need to be of sufficient size for sufficient standard to accommodate a bus. Two other just quick points to pick up. Since we wrote the report, we had the water outages in Whitstable, and obviously there's a lot of understandable concern locally. So we thought what we need to do is check whether with South East Water whether they would be able to supply this development, and they said that they would. They don't need to upgrade the water infrastructure to supply this site. Had they needed to, then we would have looked at a condition that would have prevented development until that any necessary upgrades had happened. But that isn't the case. No upgrades are required. So, and then the other thing was, I think that there was some question over the transport assessment as well. So we went back to Kent County Council just to double check on this, and they said, no, this is a robust transport assessment. They're happy with it. They are the legal highway authority, of course, so that it's their decision which is most important. But the model used to assess the traffic impacts is a industry standard. It was done robustly. The inputs were all acceptable to Kent County Council. So there is no question in terms of the local highways authority that they are happy with the transport assessment. And I think that was it, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. So there are 6 public speakers for this item. I think everyone is here, which is great. And I'm going to take each one in turn. Just a reminder that you have 3 minutes to speak, and I will be fairly strict at asking people to wind up. I hope that's okay with everyone. So I'm going to start with Bob Todd, who's an objector.
Chair, members, Chesterfield Parish Council remains objects to this application. Whilst residents generally recognise the need for a local secondary school, they're deeply concerned by the cumulative scale of current and proposed development in Chesterfield. If consented, Bodkin and Brooklands Farms together would more than double the number of households in the parish. Growth on that scale must be matched by infrastructure, and despite some reassurance in the planning officer's report, there is rightly deep scepticism on the delivery of this infrastructure in a timely manner. At the very least, we would ask for strong safeguards to be put in place, and this is not just waste. We are delighted at the likely 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. However, we would strongly argue real-world traffic experience does not match the modelling that we are being shown, and we would remind members that modelling is only a mathematical representation and subject to a number of assumptions. In the parameter plan, we welcome the proposed siting of bungalows closest to the existing homes on Maydowns Round. However, if permission is granted, we would ask that the phrase "in broad accordance" is reworded to provide greater certainty. The proposed secondary school is a key element to the public benefit claimed for this development. However, the land is currently proposed to be safeguarded for educational use for only 20 years. And in planning terms, this seems a relatively short period, and we therefore seek a new condition that this land be safeguarded for educational use in perpetuity to prevent risk of this important community asset being lost to alternative development. For the sustainable drainage systems, the applicant, we would ask, should design them to national standards so that they can be adopted by an appropriate body rather than leaving responsibility with new residents or management companies. We continue to hope, should the application be accepted, that the housing mix will better reflect the parish's recent housing needs survey. For these reasons, Chesterfield Parish Council asks members to refuse this application, or failing that, to impose conditions to protect existing and future residents through strong safeguards for timely development of infrastructure, longer safeguarding of the land for educational use, more robust parameter plan, and SUDs built to standards for adoption by suitable authorities. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I invite Peter Slaughter to speak next, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, this application is not yet ready for approval. There's more that needs to be said that I can tell you in 3 minutes. As stated by a councillor at the April committee, it feels like you're being bounced into making a decision. You need to be aware that over the last 2 years, the applicants have repeatedly submitted traffic modelling reports that seriously misrepresent congestion at the Chesfield and Swellcliffe roundabouts, and seriously misrepresent the Greenhill roundabout. What are they trying to hide? If you don't believe me, see for yourself. You'll see that queues at these roundabouts are regularly over 3 minutes, sometimes over 5 minutes to get through the junctions, especially when parents are driving to and from school. The latest traffic modelling from the developer shows the longest morning traffic queue on Herne Bay Road at about 40 seconds. But last week, the queue was over half a kilometre long in the morning and over 700 metres long in the afternoon. We don't know how much the very busy KCC officers working in Ashford are aware of this. You are in a much better position to know about traffic in our local roads than they are, as these junctions are just down the road from you. Any decision on this application should be deferred until the applicants do their modelling properly. They should be asked to provide modelling that shows that the queues that we see every day, and that's when you're modelling present-day levels of traffic. When modelling future traffic flows, of course, the queues are likely to be greater. Regarding the Greenhill roundabout, the developers argue that the development would not have a severe traffic impact as they would only add 2% to the most congested arm of the roundabout. The developers are using similar arguments about the Chesfield roundabout, but it is deceptive. If the 2% figure were to be correct, it would need to be considered in context. Would it be the 2% that breaks the camel's back, for example? Congestion at these roundabouts could already be described as severe. There would also be other developments adding small percentages to these roundabouts, and we don't know what the cumulative impacts would be. At the April committee, concerns were raised about the traffic modelling, but kicked into the long grass by council representatives, using arguments like, "There is nothing more that we can ask for that we don't know already, and it really has been thoroughly looked at." But these arguments are clearly not correct because the modelling doesn't show the congestion that we already see. If you take the quick and easy option and simply rubber stamp this application this evening, the consequences won't affect most of you except perhaps at the ballot box, but they will make life worse for local residents and create problems for future generations to solve. So can we defer, please, to solve these problems, in particular using the correct the correct link type in the modelling. Thank you.
Thank you. And could I invite Councillor Naomi Smith to come and speak next, please?
Chair, members, thank you for allowing me to speak. My concerns are the resilience of the water supply to this development. Before I begin, I would like to thank Simon Thomas for his patience over the last week in responding to my very persistent questions on this issue. Members have seen the correspondence between us together with the South East Water's response. I fully accept that South East Water have a statutory duty to provide a water connection to new developments. I'm not asking committee to challenge that duty. However, having read the correspondence and South East Water's response, I remain concerned that one key question is still unanswered. South East Water has demonstrated that the existing local distribution network is capable of physically connecting to the Bodkin Farm development. My concern is whether there is sufficient resilient water supply behind that network to reliably serve both existing residents and future homes. The correspondence does not explain what infrastructure improvements are still required or when those improvements will actually be delivered. We know from South East Water's own evidence to Scrutiny Committee in March that resilience improvements would not be completed before this summer, but we still don't know when they will be delivered. We also know that our communities have continued to experience repeated supply interruptions, with emergency tankering needed to simply keep the taps running. Last week at full council, unanimously agreed a motion asking South East Water to provide detailed technical information on the causes of these failures, the permanent infrastructure improvements still required, and a timetable for delivering them. If members are minded to approve this application, I would ask officers to advise the committee whether there is any planning mechanism available to secure that the information from South East Water before first occupation. In particular, whether the local planning authority can secure a statement explaining how the additional demand from this development fits within South East's wider resilience programme, identifying any infrastructure improvements still required and the anticipated timetable for delivering them. I'm simply asking if there is a way for the local planning authority to secure this information before first occupation. We have a responsibility to stand up for the residents who live here now and for those who will make their homes in the years ahead. They all deserve confidence that when they turn on the tap, clean drinking water will be there. Before we approve additional demand on the network, I believe it's entirely reasonable that we understand how and when South East Water will deliver the resilience improvements needed to make this possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, I've got Richard Barrett from the Whitstable Society.
Chair, councillors, this evening I'm speaking on behalf of the Whitstable Society. And first of all, I want to say that the primary objective of quality management is to ensure that whatever you're doing, you get it right first time, because remediation is expensive. And with that in mind, we want to point out that if you approve this application without further consideration of traffic and transport management, then you'll be leaving it to future generations to expensively resolve the chaos that will occur if this application is approved. And let me clarify the issues involved here. Item 36 of the committee report says that KCC have advised that the modelling used by the developer is robust. In fact, the advice from KCC shown on the Canterbury website says that the modelling is appropriate, but they don't say appropriate for what. The software package that they use, Junction 11, is widely used for planning applications and allows for different methods of calculating traffic flows. But to get an accurate view of likely outcomes, it's important to use appropriate functions, which we believe the developer has failed to do. More than 2 years ago, the Whitstable Society pointed out that the applicant's modelling of the 3 Chestfield and Swellcliffe roundabouts was wrong, because it does not take into account how queues from each roundabout stretch back into other roundabouts and therefore reduce their capacity. They therefore failed to show how much this delays the traffic. They've also failed to show how much delay is caused by roundabouts being blocked by queues from nearby pedestrian crossings. But really, you don't need advice from KCC or their KCC modelling to see how these roundabouts are already struggling to cope. These issues are clearly obvious to local people who have lived with long traffic jams where you can queue for as long as 5 minutes before clearing the roundabouts. If the development is approved, there will also be traffic from a large secondary school and hundreds of new homes. In the experience of local people at the Chesterfield roundabout, traffic delays can already be 14 times worse than predicted by the developer after the development is completed. If the developers can only be persuaded to model these junctions properly, we may be able to see what, if any, improvements need to be made to local roads and to accommodate extra traffic. Finally, I'm sure that you don't need reminding that as is required, the model is only in respect of the application. However, in the event that the development of Brooklands is approved, then this will only add to the problems of congestion and safety, which we believe is being stored up if you approve this application without resolution of the traffic issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And next to speak is Councillor James Flanagan, who's a ward councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors and officers. So I'd like to cover 3 issues regarding Bodkin Farm. The first one, safety. And these are points that I raised when we met here back in April, which I do not believe have been addressed. Firstly, the pathway beneath the railway bridge at St John's Roundabout remains a serious concern. It is barely 1.5 metres wide, yet is expected to serve potentially hundreds of pupils travelling to the planned school from this side of Whitstable or arriving by train. There are no guardrails and in reality, no space to install them. There is also no pathway on the opposite side of the road. And in addition, the application exposes school children to unacceptable road safety risks on the A2990 as they walk towards the school. There is no footbridge planned, no railing to discourage crossings away from the pedestrian crossing or island. Even if the speed limit is reduced to 40 miles an hour, there remains a significant safety risk if, God forbid it, somebody has an accident with a car. Neither of these points have been addressed. In fact, in the original document, the original paper for this application back in April, there is a recognition of the pathway, but that nothing could be done. Both of these points, I believe, councillors, conflict with paragraph 117 of the National Planning Policy Framework, which says that developments should, and I quote, create places that are safe, secure and attractive, which minimise the scope for conflicts between pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles. On water supply, Councillor Naomi Smith has made some very pertinent points. While South East Water say they have the capacity to connect the development, that's the existing capacity. We've all just seen over the last few months that South East Water have had tremendous problems with technical issues, pumping the water to certain parts of Chestfield Ward. Indeed, many of us have had correspondence from residents about that in those last 2 months. We need to see absolute categorical evidence from South East Water of a wider plan, not just a statement saying, yes, this will be connected and we can supply the water, but where the sufficient water supply will come from and how they are going to overcome the existing technical issues that are already affecting parts of Chestfield Ward. And finally, on traffic modelling, I don't wish to repeat entirely what Mr Slaughter and Mr Barrett have said tonight, but there do appear to be a number of inconsistencies or indeed omissions in the traffic modelling. Let me give you 2 examples. If the schools at Bodkin and Greenhill are built, why doesn't the traffic modelling consider school pickup times and only model the peak hours just before 9 o'clock and around about 5 o'clock? This impact could be a significant impact on traffic on the A2990. And the traffic modelling isn't properly modelling the blocking of roundabouts, as you've heard already. Instead, the modelling is using an approach called vertical queuing, whereby any queue from a roundabout is considered to be stacked vertically rather than along the link road. In other words, it's not reflecting the queues that we see on roundabouts at Chesfield Road or St John Roads today, nor is it properly reflecting the queues that will form from this development.
Start to
let alone
wind up,
other
please.
developments. Councillors, I ask, just my final sentence, please, for these reasons, refuse this application, or at the very least, defer to get this extra information that's required to make such a substantial decision on such a large application. Thank you
very much. Okay, so now we've heard our public speakers. Sorry. Oh, I do apologise. We do have one more speaker, which is Tim Burden. Sorry, I was getting ahead of myself there.
I won't take it personally, Chair. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Tim Burden from Turley, speaking on behalf of Parker Strategic Land. You have before you a detailed report that responds to a number of matters, and you've just heard from Mr. Thomas. Specifically, at your previous meeting, members raised questions about the proposed secondary school, including its role in supporting planned growth and the arrangements for delivering the school. I'd like to briefly address those points. Fundamentally, it is important to ensure that sufficient secondary school capacity can be delivered to serve Whitstable and the wider coastal area. Indeed, as someone who grew up in Canterbury and went to school here, I know that this has been a challenge for many decades. Kent County Council has consistently identified the need for additional capacity, with many local pupils currently travelling into Canterbury for their education due to a lack of available spaces closer to home. As the district continues to grow, the demand for secondary school places will only become more acute. Importantly, the principle of a secondary school at Bodkin Farm is already well established. The site has been promoted through the Emerging Local Plan as a school-led allocation and has been subject of master planning and design work led by KCC. The concept has therefore been thoroughly considered and is supported by Canterbury City Council, Kent County Council and Chesfield Parish Council, as you've heard. This application turns that strategic ambition into a deliverable opportunity, which will be secured through a Section 106 legal agreement. This will secure over 8 hectares of land for a future secondary school and provide the access and supporting infrastructure required to facilitate its delivery. In doing so, it safeguards the opportunity to meet future educational needs in this part of the district. Members will appreciate that delivering a new secondary school is a complex process. Whilst planning permission alone cannot guarantee when a school will be built, it is an essential first step. Without a suitable site, planning permission and related infrastructure, there can be no school. This application secures all three. The Education Authority will also be able to draw on developer contributions from growth across the wider area, alongside other funding streams. Crucially, the Council's own infrastructure delivery plan identifies this as a priority secondary school site. The application represents the most advanced opportunity to deliver the school that Whitstable and the coastal communities need. For those reasons, we hope members can approve the application subject to the completion of the legal agreement and relevant planning conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so there is a recommendation that the authorization be given to the head of planning to grant planning permission subject to a Section 106 legal agreement to secure the obligations set out in this report and the imposition of the safeguarding conditions as recommended in this report. And I will remind members again, and members of the public, the reason I'm doing this from the chair is that so the officer report can be debated, but I have an open mind on this application and I will reach my opinion on the acceptability or otherwise of the planning application once the debate has concluded. So do I, as I propose that, do I see a seconder, please?
Seconded.
Seconded by
Chair.
Councillor Edwards.
With the same proviso that you've made about my own decision making. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I'll open it up for discussion from members. Councillor Stockley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start by thanking Simon Thomas for the amount of work that's gone into the second report, effectively. It's noticeable how much better this development now is, in my view. I'm interested in one of the speakers because, as people may know, I hate attenuation ponds. I think they're an abomination. So any possibility of getting the groundwater removal taken on by adopted by a third party would be of great interest to myself, because I've often wondered what will happen in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, when these start silting up or becoming less effective. Now, this presumably will be down to the residents to fund any improvements that are then necessary. So I'll be interested in that. I do share the concerns about road traffic. In my ward, we had 1,600 homes built, and KCC's modelling was woefully inadequate, in my opinion. But I know from experience that we're banging our head against a brick wall. They are the consultants, they are the authority, and if they say it's robust, then we have no legs to stand on in that respect. Naomi's point about water delivery concerns me greatly as someone who lives in Herne Bay and has suffered many water outages over the last few months. You know, it is obvious that our water supply companies are having problems. I like the idea of having a condition that allows for an explanation of how the upgrades will improve the deliverability of water. But in general, I think that we have come as far as we can come with this. My main concern is, you know, we've been asked to defer this. I think we're all aware that come October, the Labour government has decided that if this hasn't gone through, it'll be removed from our hands anyway. You know, it will no longer be in front of this committee to decide. It will be a government inspector, and we all know what the outcome of that will be. And many of the advantages that have been acquired by our planning officers will be lost, in my view. So reluctantly, I think I'm going to have to look favourably on this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Buttman.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to carry on really what Councillor Stockley was saying there about some sort of condition or something that we might be able to use for South East Water, because obviously previously Southern Water said there was no issue, and a few months later, or whenever the last meeting between this time, now there is work that needs to be done. And I think, you know, South East Water have just announced a hose pipe ban for Surrey and Sussex as well, so things change very rapidly on opposed to that. So yeah, I'd like, well, if it's okay, is to propose some sort of condition for South East Water, sorry, for this site regarding South East Water, if that's possible. Is that?
Simon, do you want to come back on that point specifically on a condition?
Yeah. I mean, I think, like I said earlier on, if they'd identified a need for reinforcements, they've done modelling. You know, they model their network and everything. If they'd identified a need for improvements, and they said, for example, it will take 3 years to do, then yes, we would put a condition on saying no development to be occupied until that has happened. But what they've identified that there is no requirement for improvements. Obviously, this is completely separate from the issue of the outages, which you know, is not a matter for this planning committee. And you know, we've had a report recently of the £30 million that has been you know, put towards looking into that issue and dealing with that issue, but that's not a matter for now. But what they've done, we asked them, you know, is the system, are there any infrastructure improvements required? They said no. Therefore, there's nothing for us to do in terms of condition in this particular case.
that's fair enough with the infrastructure. I guess, yeah, it's obviously just the £15 million has been ring fenced for those sort of improvements rather than the whole 30. It was more of a case of if the infrastructure is fine, it's what's going to go down the pipes. You know, is it just going to be dirt or nothing? So that's why I was thinking it was more of the delivery of the actual water itself. So if you just would you, I will just read out this proposal. I'll read it and see what people think, if I can find it. Right. And so obviously we also spoke about
Councillor, which point are you addressing here? Sorry.
Sorry, I'm addressing you now. You spoke about infrastructure, and that doesn't need to be upgraded. But I'm saying what goes within this infrastructure. So the infrastructure, I take it, I read it as being the pipes and that sort of thing, but not actually what is contained within that, the actual water itself that's going to come out of the taps. So not the tap, not the pipes, the actual water itself. And you know, we did speak about Grampian style conditions and toolboxes quite a lot over the past. So this was going to be my proposal for a condition, if that's okay to read it.
Simon's just going to respond on that.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, from what I understand, you're talking about the quality of the water.
No, just the water itself coming out. You know, when you turn the tap on and nothing happens. That.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. Well, that's the legal responsibility of the water company, and if they fail, then obviously they've got Ofwat as the regulator. And as you said, there's a certain amount of money which has been put forward to address this in the very short term, but also they have to, every 5 years they have to have an investment plan showing how they're going to meet the demands of water over that following 5 years. So that's their responsibility, and that's regulated by Ofwat, not by us. You know, we don't have any control over that.
Okay, I'm still going to read out the my proposal. Because and then you can sort of go from there as you haven't read it yet. I've said, so it would read, so it's along the lines of a Grampian style thing. It would read, no dwelling hereby permitted shall be occupied until confirmation has been provided to the local planning authority by South East Water, or another suitably qualified person approved by the local planning authority, that adequate potable water supply capacity is available and operational to serve the development, and that all necessary off-site and on-site reinforcement works have been completed. Occupation shall take place only in accordance with these approved arrangements.
Sharing that. Can you share that wording with the committee? Email the committee, or?
I think what I understood you were saying is you wanted confirmation from Southern Water that there will be adequate water to serve the development. But that's their legal responsibility. So their answer will be yes, because that's their legal responsibility. It's not for us to oversee this, and I appreciate why we might want to, but it's just not our role. That they have to supply adequate water, full stop. Now, when it goes wrong, the regulator steps in. So the only thing we can look at is if they said the infrastructure's not there, so for example, they need new pipes or whatever, then we could hold back development to allow that to happen. And that would be very much within our remit. But anything else is not. Yeah, and it might be frustrating, but I appreciate it, but we can't overstep the mark. We can't go into an area that is not our legal responsibility.
Okay, so obviously, you know, when they were those recent outages, when they were on Radio Kent and said it was issues with Thanningston pumping station and the technical difficulties, that's not relevant either.
Well, I mean, we've asked them directly the question here as to whether they can supply without improvements, and they say yes. You know, if they couldn't, they would have said no. They would have said, well, we need to upgrade a pumping station or whatever, and that will take 2 years. Therefore, we want to stop you granting permission. Yeah, they would have that, not that power, but you know, they would have some influence there that we would have to consider. If they said we cannot supply, you know, we would then have to deal with that through planning. But that's not what they've said. They've said that the infrastructure is fine and it's sufficient for this development.
Councillor Thomas, I think, was next.
Thank you, Chair. I kind of where we are. When it comes to the bungalows that on the perimeter of the road, and I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name of the road already. Can we make a condition that those are kept as bungalows rather than, i.e., the footings are done low enough so they can't be converted into houses? Because obviously, once you build up, you build up.
Simon's indicating that is something we can do.
Yeah,
So, yes,
that's
that's something
great,
that
'cause
we
it-
can include as a condition.
Yeah, if we can make that as a good, because quite often, yeah.
Informative ones.
So we don't even need a condition. We can put an informative on because they would need, someone's indicating that they would need permission anyway the developer would need permission to do something higher. So
Yeah, but that's not. I'd really like a condition where the footings are made such a way, because we have it in quite a lot. We've had it in Cherry Gardens. I've had it on in my ward where you've got a retirement village, which Cherry Gardens was, is now a family. And I don't want to take houses away from families, but they've been converted and doubled and this and the other, and that's going to back onto the residents. So we almost need to put a condition in, if we can, to actually restrict, because they'll just come through. Once one gets permission, then it's too late. They all get permission because it sets a precedent, and that's kind of what's happening in that area. So I'm just thinking long term whether we can sort of restrict that, and there's whether the footings aren't big, restricted, so therefore the properties can't build up. I mean, they may be able to build in the loft, but I don't know where we can do with that.
no, I get the point you're
Yeah.
making, actually.
Yeah.
Simon.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, I think we put it in here, and we can. Have we put the condition? We must have done, actually. I'm going to check. Conditions saying that they should be bungalows. So when the reserve matters come in the detailed application, then these will have to be shown as bungalows. Otherwise, they won't comply with the condition that we put on now, if you grant permission. In the future, if they build up, then they would need planning permission for that. So then we'd have to look at the impact on the neighbours in the normal way. Yeah.
So no then. Basically, can I make one more point? Sorry, Chair. It's got nothing to do with this planning application, but I may be completely incorrect, but I thought there's an upgrade going on at Chesterfield, and I mean, it would be great if you could have disability access, because it isn't accessible with wheelchairs.
Sorry,
and
which
stuff.
are you referring to the station, the railway station?
For train station, yes, yeah, sorry.
Because it's currently inaccessible, isn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, if for instance that becomes accessible, obviously that's going to have a lift. That's going to have, so therefore the children won't have to cross or go down the alleyway or a busy road. They can actually cross a thing. It's not going to happen, but I would love to actually have a proper footbridge from the school across the Thanet Way as we have in Greenhill, because I think that would save quite a lot of time and save a lot of lives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I could probably answer that one myself, actually, as I work for Network Rail, and it's funding that will come from the Department for Transport Access for All scheme could maybe in the future. And I certainly couldn't promise anything because I'm not in a position to do that anyway. But that's within their remit, if you like. So, but it's certainly a point that's been minuted and taken account of. With that, Councillor Dan Smith.
Thanks very much. Actually, I totally agree with what Councillor Thomas has just said about and yourselves about Network Rail. That would be very handy to have a footbridge there, because I agree it's dangerous. On the subject of dangerous on that crossing, I wondered if there was any pedestrian modelling done that could be shared, because there's if you have a school there and also with the residents that are there, the usage of the nearby facilities, shopping facilities, would include Sainsbury's, which is on the other side of the Chesterfield Road from there, and the McDonald's and so on, which is across the Thanet Way and on the other side of the roundabout. So, as well as the railway bridge and the narrow access. So there's a number of pedestrian movements around there, which would be quite complex and difficult with the traffic issues that everyone knows exists there. So I wondered if there was any modelling that could be shared that we know of that deals with those issues or tries to address them or makes the committee aware of them. Thank you.
I'll just check. I don't think there's any modelling that we already have.
People go and go to Sainsbury's, go to the train station.
Because obviously, I think the point being that people will go in all sorts of different directions for their journeys, whether that's to or from the station, to or from supermarkets, whatever it happens to be. So it's lots of different destinations in the area, isn't it? Really. I don't see any other speakers. So with that, we'll go to the vote. I propose we go to the vote. Do we need to clarify any points before we do that? I think we've clarified everything we need to, both in this session and in the previous meeting. So I'll ask John to set up the vote. Thank you.
That's carried. 5 in favour, 3 abstain.
Thank you very much, everyone. I will move on to item number 8, which is application number CA/25/01454/OUT 86A Chesfield Road, Chesfield. That's on pages 52 to 64 of your papers. And I'll ask Emily to introduce the report, who's been waiting very patiently. We'll just wait for a few people to leave the room because obviously they've been waiting for one item. So if you just hang on 30 seconds, that'd be great. Okay, we'll continue. Sorry, Emily, after you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This is an outline application for a detached dwelling garage and a garage at 86A Chesfield Road, including access, layout and scale. Sorry. Okay. So the application site is outlined in red on the screen ahead of you. Members may recall an application for 5 detached dwellings being brought before the committee last summer on the site, which was approved. And this application proposes an additional dwelling on an area that was identified as mixed grass, shrub and tree planting on this original application. This application has been brought to you by, been brought before the committee at the request of Councillor Flanagan, just to consider the increased density and massing created by an additional dwelling on the site. So this is the proposed site plan for this outline application, and it's considered that the addition of this additional dwelling to the west or the rear of the site, shown in that red line, would consolidate the existing backland development. there would be an increase from about 7.7 to 9 dwellings per hectare if this dwelling was to be approved, which would allow the development to remain low density, and it would be a marginal uplift. It's also considered that having this additional dwelling on the site would be an effective and efficient use of the land, and it would provide an additional dwelling in a sustainable location. It would also be softened by those 5 dwellings that have previously been approved and the surrounding built form. Details regarding layout and scale have been submitted for consideration. So the footprint is similar to those that have been previously been approved, and the 2-storey scale will be comparable to other dwellings, so it's considered that it will be suitable for the site. Appearance and landscaping are reserved matters, so they'd be submitted later on for consideration. The dwellings positioned to the rear and the wider pattern of development would ensure it would not harm the character and appearance of the conservation area and the setting of the listed building to the east. The harm is considered to be less than substantial, but given that 5 dwellings have already been approved on the site and there is this public benefit from an additional dwelling, that harm is considered to be outweighed. The closest dwelling to the proposed is Unit 5 to the north, but there is about a 2.5 metre separation distance, which is considered acceptable. The scale will be comparable to the other dwellings as well, so it's considered there wouldn't be an unacceptable impact on neighbours with regards to overbearing and overshadowing, and the overlooking impact could be designed out at the reserve matters stage when appearance and landscaping details are submitted. Ecology, the Environment Agency and KCC Highways have all been consulted on the application as per the officer report and have no objections to the proposed development. So the recommendation for myself is to grant the application subject to safeguarding conditions and a legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. I've got 3 public speakers for this item, and I'll take them in turn. Each of our speakers has 3 minutes each, and as I said before, I will keep that a fairly strict time limit. So can I ask Bob Todd to come up, please?
Some familiar faces. Chesterfield Parish Council strongly objects to this application. We do not consider the insertion of an additional self-build dwelling within what was presented as a coherent 5-house cul-de-sac to be appropriate. The proposal is not simply a self-built house. It is in effect the addition of a 6th dwelling on a site where concerns already existed regarding density, access, and the impact on the character of the area arising from the recently approved 5-house development. Whilst the planning officer's report describes the increase in density as modest, the proposed plot of around 236 square metres is roughly half the size of the current smallest neighbouring residential houses, and substantially smaller than many of the adjacent properties on Chesterfield Road. The officer's report also describes this as a consolidation of Blackland development. An alternative view is that it represents a 3rd generation of garden development. First 86A from 86 Chesterfield Road, then the 5 houses from 86A, and now a further dwelling on this site. The cumulative effect of these 2 issues is a gradual erosion of the spaciousness and openness that characterises this part of Chesterfield. This is particularly relevant given that the Council's heritage advisors acknowledged harm, albeit small, to the setting of the adjacent listed building through the loss of openness. The Parish Council believes that this continuing erosion of openness should be given greater weight. The submission of this application as a self-build only weeks after the approval of the 5-house scheme means that the full development potential of the whole site has not been assessed through a single comprehensive proposal. And this is demonstrated by the impact on the biodiversity strategy for the 5-house approved scheme and the potential need for off-site compensation. It is also interesting to note that a self-build, this application, is exempt from biodiversity net gains. Members are not being asked whether one more house can physically fit on the site. The question is whether this additional dwelling, on top of the 5 recently accepted, preserves the character, spaciousness and layout of the local area. The Parish Council believes it does not and respectfully urges you to committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor James Flanagan, who's the ward councillor, to speak next?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening again, councillors. So yes, I have called this into committee primarily on concerns for housing density. As the report states, this site had planning permission granted for 5 houses just last year on the 1st of July. So I'm sorry to have to call this in and keep your time here, councillors, particularly as the application for the 6th property was validated just 45 days after permission was granted for the original 5. My concern is one primarily of what I would class development creep. As you've heard from Mr. Todd a few moments ago, this particular site is smaller than neighbouring sites and smaller than many properties along Chesfield Road where access to this site is located. But the key point is that the plot is smaller than many properties along the road itself. If you look at the map that Emily showed a few moments ago, you can see the properties strung out along Chesfield Road there. There are indeed a number of ways to consider density, but in terms of the site itself at around 9 dwellings per hectare, that is still at or above the density of nearby properties along the said Chesfield Road where the access point is located. In addition to this, the proposed dwelling scale of the dwelling causes a major issue, exacerbated concerns over cramped development and density, specifies a maximum gross internal area of 240 square metres, maximum height of 9.5 metres. I believe this is excessive for this location and out of proportion with existing properties in the nearby area. You've also heard about concerns for sustainability. I think some of the wording is weak in terms of commitment to biodiversity. The use of language in the application such as consideration will be given, that doesn't provide a lot of comfort in terms of the outlook for biodiversity net gain, and that definitely needs strengthening. As Mr. Todd said, I think the other issue is the green area now being removed. We are seeing an erosion of green open space in this particular area, and this will be absolutely the case if we lose the one remaining green space for this particular plot. One is left with, so my request to you, councillors, is to refuse this application for the reasons I've given, it being density primarily, but I will leave you with this one question. If there are no concerns for density, why wasn't this additional dwelling included in the original application that was granted back in July last year? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flanagan. So the recommendation for this is to grant. Oh, I'm really sorry. I've got a horrible habit tonight of just going straight through. Our next speaker is Nigel Taylor, who's the agent. Apologies.
So, thank you, Chair. Good evening, members of the Planning Committee and supporting officers. My name's Nigel Taylor. I'm an architect representing the applicant Discovered By, who are a local plot finding provider in Kent. I'm presenting on behalf of James Clegg Architects in support of the application. It's worth verifying that full support has now been given by officers to the application before you, with all technical consultees satisfied with the scheme proposals. The site is previously developed land, and the principle of development has already been established. After review, the land at present may be considered a little underutilised, with the 5 detached homes that were granted planning consent, as you've heard, on the 1st of July last year. where the surrounding average density of housing is actually much greater. And hence the proposal before members tonight for this additional self-build plot that makes effective use of land and further boosts the supply of housing at a time when Canterbury has identified a shortfall. In respect of parking, which can be a sensitive issue, there's actually an over-provision of 3 parking spaces offered against the KCC standards for suburban locations. And when including the custom-built plot, the scheme still retains an unallocated visitor space as well. As you will have heard, I have been advised that the application has been called in tonight on density grounds, and despite much comfort and cooperation from the applicant on this matter, in response, a contextual density plan has been provided to show the quantum of proposed housing in comparison to the existing area. And again, as you will have heard in summary, the application site before you tonight equates to a density of 8.7 dwellings per hectare, which, as per the case officer's report, is considered to be, and I quote, very low density development. By comparison, the surrounding density within Chesterfield is higher, and if we look at the grain and density of housing in the locality, over the past 50 to 60 years of house building, we see a density of around 15 dwellings per hectare in the locality. It is therefore, we would say, inaccurate and unreasonable to suggest otherwise that the development proposals to include the self-built plot is now too dense and represents an overdevelopment of the site. The scheme has been confirmed as acceptable in all planning matters, as set out in your officer's report, and we therefore ask members to grant planning consent tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies again for nearly missing you. So the recommendation is to grant subject to legal agreement and safeguarding conditions. And I will repeat, I'm doing this so that the officer report can be debated, but that I do have an open mind on the application, and I will reach my opinion on the acceptability or otherwise of a planning application once the debate has been concluded. Do I see a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second, Chair, on the same proviso. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I'll open it up for discussion. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Dan Smith.
I'm just saying I agree with the speaker about the lack of understanding of why this wasn't included in the previous application of the 5 houses. It seems like a complete and utter waste of the planning committee's time to be dealing with this addition to a previous application. It is in effect one that only took place barely a year ago. I'm uncomfortable with that. Thank you.
Is there anything we can respond with, or it's just a general comment, I suppose? I don't think there is a particular response needed for that, but Councillor Stockley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm surprised to learn that biodiversity is not a consideration with self-built houses. Obviously, this would have been an area that could be diverse and useful for invertebrates, etc. Slapping another great big house on it is obviously going to have an effect on that. So I'm concerned about that angle. Part of me thinks that we should be using the land that's available to best resources, i.e. the number of properties on a pitch plot. But the other side of me thinks that, you know, it's a little, in my view, unacceptable to acquire planning consent and then come straight back in less than a year's time with yet another property to squeeze on there, because as we know, it's very difficult to refuse once permission has been granted. So while it's probably legal, it doesn't feel like best practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I see Councillor David Thomas? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I need a bit of information, I suppose. Was the original application we passed last year, was this piece of land part of the biodiversity on that site to allow us to have those houses on that site as a mitigation to allow us to have those properties built? Thank you.
Thank you. Under the previous application, this parcel or the part of the plot in question was identified as an area which could be used for trees and shrubs and so on. There has been a lot of dialogue with KCC Ecology surrounding the BNG metric that was provided for the previous application, and they believe that part of this new dwelling would encroach into some of the habitats that were going to form part of that metric that was provided. But they are happy that the biodiversity gain plan informative that is put on that previous application, that as part of that plan, a revised metric could be submitted which would include this new dwelling on the site, and it could be calculated if biodiversity net gain could still be provided completely on the site or if there would need to be some off-site provision. There is a BNG hierarchy, so they have to provide biodiversity net gain on site first. If that isn't possible, then it is within other land owned by the applicant or in the application site, and then it's off-site. So Ecology were happy that there could be potential for it to be provided on site. If not, the combination of on-site and off-site provision would ensure that the net gain can still be provided under the previous application. Like you said, for this application, self-build dwellings are exempt from BNG requirements, so that wouldn't be something that would need to be considered for the self-build dwelling. But the BNG requirements for the previous dwelling, KCC Ecology are satisfied that could be dealt with through that informative on the previous application and permission.
So basically, we looked at the application, we agreed the properties would be the biodiversity, we've granted that permission, and now the applicants is it gone for a self-build, so that equation doesn't come into it. So they've quite cleverly put in an application for a self-build, so the biodiversity doesn't affect that. So they've kind of circumvented the planning application. Thank you.
I'm going to propose we move to the vote. If John could set that up, that would be great.
That's fallen, 3 against, 3 abstain and 2 in favour.
Okay, so that has fallen. I think that takes us to the end of the agenda.
Well, we need.
We do need to decide a planning.
So they've not.
Okay, as that item has fallen, we do need to, as a committee, decide what we do next and what action we want to take next, whether that is a deferral, whether that's a site visit, whether that is some other course of action, and of course, or it is, yeah. So I'm looking for contributions from the floor on what we do next. Jan's going to speak. Kath, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate what the Chair has said, you voted not to grant this application, so we need to have something before we can leave. Whether or not, because I know size of the plot was mentioned, so it may well be that you feel that a site visit might be useful so that you can have a look and see the size of the plot, whether or not there were points that you wanted to raise and have further explanation by officers, and so deferment, or indeed if you wanted to refuse. But if you were putting forward a refusal, I'd remind you that we do need proper planning reasons. Thank you.
Councillor Dan Smith.
I think it's been mentioned about it being in essence a backland development and also out of form of the other properties in the immediate location. So I think those are both valid planning reasons. So.
Yeah, I mean, character of the area is a valid planning reason, but I think as you've seen from the plans, this isn't any more dense. It's very low density development, so I think it'd be very difficult to argue to an inspector that this is high density development and therefore out of character with the area. I think we very much struggle there, and I think we would risk being found unreasonable to say it's high density or it's in any other way out of character, because it's not. It just isn't. It's low density like the surrounding area. And also the other point about the backland is that we've already granted permission for 5 on that site. There was already a dwelling there before, so it's not as though this is just an open area of land. It had a dwelling, now it's got permission for 5, and this is the 6th one on that piece of land.
It is nonetheless a weak reason.
So can you repeat that last point?
It is nonetheless, I think, as Simon has said, a reason.
A
It may be a
reason,
weak
yeah.
reason, but it
Yes, if I may come in on the strength of that reason. It is a reason. It's a very weak reason, and I would imagine it would be considered unreasonable.
Councillor Dixie.
Chair, could I suggest we have a site visit?
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Stockley.
Reluctantly, I would second that.
Okay. Councillor Buttman. Is this on a?
It's on that point.
Yes.
I've got right. Yeah, no, it would be about a site visit, and also to see what's of this BNG land, which was BNG and now it's not BNG, and it might be BNG, and what green space is being used. So if there could be at some point some information, just to clarify, because I wasn't really sure, I didn't really understand about the self-build and the net gain situation and what was originally agreed and now not quite. But yeah, that would be a reason for site visiting, please.
I think the options we have in front of us then are one, a site visit, which has been proposed and seconded. The other option is that we can defer, and a bit like what we've just done with the Bodkin Farm application, ask for another report to come back to the committee with further information that the committee would like to see that hasn't already been addressed. So it's sort of in your hands, really. I think what you would like to do, Councillor Stockley.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's not an unusual situation. The committee has expressed its view that it's not in favour of this development, but now we're hand-tied by the legal requirements of finding a justifiable reason that stands up to the inspector's scrutiny. This is one of the reasons why this position for councillors is so difficult, because we are not planning experts. The officer has gone into quite detailed explanation about why biodiversity is acceptable to KCC, etc. A lot of which I didn't understand, to be honest. So a report illustrating in simple terms what this is about would be useful. I am concerned about the biodiversity loss. I also understand that it's not relevant with the self-build. That's not something we can address, that's government. We're stuck with what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. So maybe a report illustrating the loss of, although thinking about it logically, we can't do anything with it if we do get a report. We're stuck with where we are. So while I have seconded a site visit, thinking logically and laterally about that, it will serve no purpose, because we are where we are. We need now to decide whether we grant or refuse, and if we refuse, we're then left with the possibility of the inspector finding that we're being unreasonable and finding against us with terms of damages. So I'm reluctant to continue with the site visit because I don't think it will serve any useful purpose. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards.
I don't think the BNG is that confusing in the report already. We have a paragraph 34. If people look at that, and the officer has explained it. It is quite clear that at the moment KCC think that the original informative can be met. Okay, so the house goes in, but other places on the site they can achieve the net gain. So this is a 10% net gain. I know we're in the new plan we're going for 20, but this is a 10%, and there is still a fair amount of land around the houses. So I think that's what they mean. I just don't want to, if we look at that, if I look at that, I've read it since the question was raised. It seems to me the explanation is there. So I think if you were going for a site visit, it would need to be for something else. Either, I don't know, because the other houses won't be built, will they? So they won't be there. So it's very difficult to imagine what we're going to see from my point of view, because I presume it's either a few digging bits in the ground or a few bases. It won't be. So I think we need to make a decision.
Councillor Stockley.
Following on from what my learned colleague has said, I agree, because we are in a position where none of us can really come up with a planning reason to refuse that would withstand in the inspector's view. That's personally why I abstained, because while I don't like it, I can't come up with a planning reason to refuse it. So I think we do need possibly to vote again.
So because we've moved on the debate a bit, Simon informs me we can run the vote again. So that, and I'll just double check this with Kath.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Stockley, I'm afraid that on the last occasion, I have to correct you. You voted against. However, it may well be that because the matter and the debate has continued, that your finger might touch a different. But yes, we can put the vote again if that's what members would wish.
Thank you, Kath. I stand corrected. I certainly intended to abstain, but I may have not had my glasses on and may have pressed the wrong button. But all is possible.
It's happened before. Don't worry. I think we'll run the vote. John, if you could do the honours, please. We're going to run the same vote again.
That's carried 5 in favour, 1 against and 2 abstained.
Okay, right. So that's that item concluded. Item 10 is the planning appeals report. There are no planning appeals decisions to report, so we're okay on that front. Number 11, there is no urgent business to be dealt with in public. I haven't been advised of any. And no any other business that falls under the exempt prevention provisions. Date of next meeting is Tuesday, the 18th of August, 2026. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you in a few weeks' time.